I am back to play more World of Warcraft. I think I officially got myself addicted last night. Actually. Huh. Interesting. Whoops. Do. Nope. And do. Oh, come on. There we go. And get that out of here. That out of here. And let's see here. That there. And LARP tape, as is tradition. Oops, I forgot to take my captain's log emojis down. Let's see here. Closed captions. Wait, no, that's not what I'm trying to do. Wait, what was I gonna do? Oh, the emojis, I mean. Duh, why did I say closed captions? And we'll put the thinking emoji up there for thinking. So I don't know what else to put up there right now. Very good. Alright. How does that even work? Whatever. Anyway. No. I wasn't paying attention very much, and there we go. Alright, I fixed it. Wait a moment. Am I talking? Alright, I am talking. Very good. Okay. And do one last thing. Shit. There we go. Okay. Wait, no. I guess we'll do it like this. What should I make my title? Whoa, wait. Okay. Oh yeah, I was gonna listen to the Lex Freeman, Joe Rogan thing. I forgot. I guess I shouldn't be on YouTube if I want to listen to that though. Oh well, it'll just get taken down. It's okay, I don't care. I mean, not Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro. Oh my God, here we go.
The great lie we tell ourselves is that people who are evil are not like us. They're a class apart. Everybody in history who has sinned is a person who's very different from me. Robert George, the philosopher over at Princeton.
Are we ready to get triggered?
Sort of thought experiment in his classes where he asks people to raise their hand if they had lived in Alabama in 1861. How many of you would be abolitionists?
And everybody raises their hand. He says, of course that's not true. Of course that's not true. The best protection against evil is recognizing that it lies in every human heart and the possibility that it takes you over.
Do you ever sit back, in the quiet of your own mind and think, am I participating in evil? The following is a conversation with Ben Shapiro, a conservative political commentator, host of The Ben Shapiro Show, co-founder of The Daily Wire, and author of several books, including The Authoritarian Moment, The Right Side of History, and Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings. Whatever your political leanings, I humbly ask that you try to put those aside and listen with an open mind, trying to give the most charitable interpretation of the words we say. This is true in general for this podcast, whether the guest is Ben Shapiro or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Donald Trump or Barack Obama.
Wait, he's had
I'll
Trump?
talk to everyone.
He's
from
not had to them.
Every side.
Dude, respect,
from the far
though.
left to the far right.
Respect.
From presidents
Shapiro
to prisoners.
isn't even far
from
right.
artists to scientists. From the powerful to the powerless. Because we are all human. All capable of good and evil. All with fascinating stories and ideas to explore. I seek only to understand, and in so doing, hopefully, add a bit of love to the world. This is the Lex Fridman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Ben Shapiro. Let's start with a difficult topic. What do you think about the comments made by Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, about Jewish people?
They're awful and anti-Semitic, and they seem to get worse over time. They started off with the bizarre DEFCON 3 tweet, and then they went into even more stereotypical garbage about Jews and Jews being sexual manipulators. I think that was the Pete Davidson, Kim Kardashian stuff, and then Jews running all of the media, Jews being in charge of the financial sector, Jewish people. I mean, I called it on my show, there's Sherman Nazism, and it is. I mean, it's like right from Protocols of the Elders of Zion type stuff.
Do you think those words come from pain? Where do they come from?
And, it's always hard to try and read somebody's mind. What he looks like to me, just having experience in my own family with people who are bipolar, is he seems like a bipolar personality. He seems like somebody who is in the middle of a manic episode. And when you're manic, you tend to say a lot of things that you shouldn't say, and you tend to believe that they're the most brilliant things ever said. The Washington Post did an entire piece speculating about how bipolarism played into the kind of stuff that Ye was saying.
Bipolarism.
And, it's hard for me to think that it's not playing into it, especially because even if he is an anti-Semite, and I have no reason to suspect he's not, given all of his comments, if he had an ounce of common sense, he would stop at a certain point. And bipolarism tends to drive you well past the point where common sense applies. So, I mean, I would imagine it's coming from that. I mean, from his comments, I would also imagine that he's doing the logical mistake that a lot of anti-Semites or racists or bigots do, which is,
whoops, I didn't mean to pause.
Somebody hurt me. That person is a Jew. Therefore, all Jews are bad.
No, it's
and that jump from a person did something to me I don't like, who's a member of a particular race or class, and therefore everybody of that race or class is bad. I mean, that's textbook bigotry, and that's pretty obviously what Ye's engaging in here.
So jumping from the individual to the group.
That's the way he's been expressing it, right? He keeps talking about his Jewish agents. And I watched your interview with him, and you kept saying, so just name the agents, right? Just name the people who are screwing you. And he wouldn't do it. Instead, he just kept going back to the general, the group, the Jews in general. I mean, that's textbook bigotry. And if it were put in any other context, you would probably recognize it as such.
To the degree his words fuel hate in the world, what's the way to reverse that process? What's the way to alleviate the hate?
I mean, when it comes to alleviating the kind of stuff that he's saying, obviously debunking it, making clear that what he's saying is garbage. But the reality is that I think that
Let's hear your debunking of it all, Ben Shapiro.
Most people who are in any way engaged with these issues. I don't think they're being convinced to be anti-Semitic by Ye. I mean, I think there's a group of people who may be swayed that anti-Semitism is acceptable because Ye is saying what he's saying, and he's saying so very loudly, and he's saying it over and over. But yeah, I think that, for example, there were these signs that were popping up in Los Angeles saying Ye is right. Well, that group's been out there posting anti-Semitic signs on the freeways for years. And there are groups like that posting anti-Semitic signs where I live in Florida. They've been doing that for years, well before Ye was saying this sort of stuff. It's just like latest opportunity to kind of jump on that particular bandwagon. But listen, I think that people do have a moral duty to call that stuff out.
So there is a degree to which it normalizes that kind of idea that Jews control the media, Jews control X institution. Is there a way to talk about a high representation of a group like Jewish people in a certain institution like the media or Hollywood and so on without it being a hateful conversation?
Sure, of course. A high percentage of higher than statistically represented in the population percentage of Hollywood agents are probably Jewish. A higher percentage of lawyers generally are probably Jewish. A higher percentage of accountants are probably Jewish.
Yep.
Also, a higher percentage of engineers are probably Asian. Like, the statistical truths are statistical truths. It doesn't necessarily mean anything about the nature of the people who are being talked about. There are a myriad of reasons why people might be disproportionately in one arena or another, ranging from the cultural to sometimes the genetic. I mean, there are certain areas of the world where people are better long-distance runners because of their genetic adaptations in those particular areas of the world. That's not racist, that's just fact. I mean, what starts to get racist is when you are attributing a bad characteristic to an entire population based on the notion that some members of that population are doing bad things.
Yeah, there's a jump between... It's also possible that record label owners as a group have a kind of culture that F's over artists.
Sure.
Doesn't treat artists fairly. And it's also possible that there's a high representation of Jews in the group of people that own record labels. But it's that small but a very big leap that people take from the group that own record labels to all Jews.
For sure. And I think that one of the other issues also is that anti-Semitism is fascinating because it breaks down into so many different parts. Meaning that if you look at sort of different types of anti-Semitism, if you're a racist against black people, it's typically because you're racist based on the color of their skin. If you're racist against the Jews, you're
That's
anti-Semitic.
racist.
Then there are actually a few different ways that breaks down. Right? You have anti-Semitism in terms of ethnicity, which is like Nazi-esque anti-Semitism. You have Jewish parentage, you have Jewish grandparents. Therefore, your blood is corrupt, and you are inherently going to have bad properties. Then there's sort of old school religious anti-Semitism, which is that the Jews are the killers of Christ, or the Jews are the sons of pigs and monkeys, and therefore Judaism is bad, and therefore Jews are bad. And sort of in the way that you get out of that anti-Semitism, historically speaking, is mass conversion, which most anti-Semitism for a couple thousand years actually was not ethnic. It was much more rooted in this sort of stuff, right? If a Jew converted out of the faith, then the anti-Semitism was quote-unquote alleviated. And then there's a sort of bizarre anti-Semitism that's political anti-Semitism, and that is members of a group that I don't like are disproportionately Jewish, therefore all Jews are members of this group or are predominantly represented in this group. So you'll see Nazis saying the communists are Jews. You'll see communists saying the Nazis are Jews, or you'll see communists saying that the capitalists are Jews. And so that's the weird thing about anti-Semitism. It's kind of like the Jews behind every corner. It's basically a big conspiracy theory. Unlike a lot of other forms of racism, which are not really conspiracy theory, anti-Semitism tends to be a conspiracy theory about the levers of power being controlled by a shadowy cadre of people who are getting together behind closed doors to control things.
Yeah, the most absurd illustration of anti-Semitism, just like you said, is Stalin versus Hitler over Poland. That every bad guy was a Jew. It was like, so every enemy, there's a lot of different enemy groups, intellectuals, political and so on, military, and behind any movement that is considered the enemy for the Nazis and any movement that's considered the enemy for the Soviet army are the Jews. What does the fact that Hitler took power teach you about human nature? When you look back at the history of the 20th century, what do you learn from that time?
I mean, there are a bunch of lessons to Hitler taking power. The first thing I think people
Whoops.
ought to recognize about Hitler taking power is that the power had been centralized in the government before Hitler took it. So if you actually look at the history of Nazi Germany, the Weimar Republic had effectively collapsed. The power had been centralized in the chancellery and really under Hindenburg for a couple of years before that. And so it was only a matter of time until someone who was bad grabbed the power. And so the struggle between the Reds and the Browns in Nazism, in pre-Nazi Germany, led to this kind of up-spiraling of radical sentiment that allowed Hitler in through the front door, not through the back door. He was elected.
So you think communists could have also taken power?
I mean, there's no question communists could have taken power. They were a serious force in pre-Nazi Germany.
Do you think there was an underlying current that would have led to an atrocity if the communists had taken power?
Wouldn't have been quite the same atrocity, but obviously the communists in Soviet Russia at exactly this time were committing the Holodomor.
Yeah.
Right. So there were very few good guys in terms of good parties. The moderate parties were being dragged by the radicals into alliance with them to prevent the worst case scenario from the other guy. Right. So if you look at, I'm sort of fascinated by the history of this period because it really does speak to how does a democracy break down. I mean, the 20s Weimar Republic was a very liberal democracy. How does a liberal democracy break down into complete fascism and then into genocide? And there's a character who was very prominent in the history of that time, named Franz von Papen, who was actually the second to last chancellor of the Republic before Hitler. So he was the chancellor, and then he handed over to Schleicher. And then Schleicher ended up collapsing, and then ended up handing power over to Hitler. It was Papen who had stumped for Hitler to become chancellor. Papen was a Catholic Democrat. He didn't like Hitler. He thought that Hitler was a radical and a nut job. But he also thought that Hitler, being a buffoon, as he saw it, was going to essentially be usable by the right forces in order to prevent the communists from taking power, maybe in order to restore some sort of legitimacy to the regime because he was popular, in order for Papen to retain power himself. And then immediately after Hitler taking power, Hitler basically kills all of Papen's friends. Papen, out of quote-unquote loyalty, stays on. He ends up helping the Anschluss in Austria. Now, all this stuff is really interesting, mainly because what it speaks to is the great lie we tell ourselves is that people who are evil are not like us. They're a class apart. People who do evil things, people who support evil people, they're not like us. And that's an easy call. Everybody in history who has sinned is a person who's very different from me. Robert George, the philosopher over at Princeton, he's fond of doing a sort of thought experiment in his classes where he asks people to raise their hand if they had lived in Alabama in 1861. How many of you would be abolitionists? And everybody raises their hand. He says, of course that's not true. Of course that's not true. The best protection against evil is recognizing that it lies in every human heart and the possibility that it takes you over.
Never underestimate
and so you have to be very cautious in how you approach these issues. And the back and forth of politics, the sort of bipolarity of politics, the polarization in politics might be a better way to put it, makes it very easy to kind of fall into the rock'em sock'em robots that eventually could theoretically allow you to support somebody who's truly frightening and hideous in order to stop somebody who you think is more frightening and hideous. This kind of language, by the way, now predominating almost all over the Western world, right? My political enemy is an enemy of democracy. My political enemy is going to end the republic. My political enemy is going to be the person who destroys the country we live in. And so that person has to be stopped by any means necessary. And that's dangerous stuff.
So the communists had to be stopped in Nazi Germany, and so they're the devil. And so any useful buffoon, as long as they're effective against the communists, would do. Do you ever wonder, because the people that are participating in evil may not understand that they're doing evil, do you ever sit back, in the quiet of your own mind and think, am I participating in evil?
Well,
I mean, so my business partner and I, one of our favorite memes is there's a British comedy show, the name escapes me, of these two guys who are members of the SS, and they're dressed in the SS uniforms and the black uniforms, the skulls on them, and they're saying to each other, one says to the other guy, you notice like the British, the symbol is something nice, and it's like an eagle. But it's a skull and crossbones. You see the Americans, you see their blue uniforms, they're very nice and pretty. Ours are jet black. Are we the baddies? And that's it. And the truth is, we look back at the Nazis and we say, well, of course they were the baddies. They wore black uniforms, and they had jackboots, and they had this and that. And of course, they were the bad guys, but evil rarely presents its face so clearly. So yeah, I mean, I think you have to constantly be thinking along those lines, and hopefully you try to avoid it. You can only do the best that a human being can do. But yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. I would say that I spend an inordinate amount of time reflecting on whether I'm doing the right thing. And I may not always do the right thing. I'm sure a lot of people think that I'm doing the wrong thing on a daily basis. But it's definitely a question that has to enter your mind as a historically aware and hopefully morally decent person.
Do you think you're mentally strong enough if you realize that you're on the wrong side of history, the switch side?
Whoops.
Very few people in history seem to be strong enough to do that.
I mean, I think that the answer I hope would be yes. You never know until the time comes and you have to do it. I will say that having heterodox opinions in a wide variety of areas is something that I have done before. I'm the only person I've ever heard of in public life who actually has a list on their website of all the dumb, stupid things I've ever said. So where I go through and I either say, this is why I still believe this, or this is why what I said was terrible and stupid. And I'm sure that list will get a lot longer.
Yeah, look forward to new additions to that.
Yeah,
list.
exactly.
Yeah, it actually is a super, super long list. People should check it out. And it's quite honest and raw. What do you think about, it's interesting to ask you, given how pro-life you are, about Ye's comments about comparing the Holocaust to the 900,000 abortions in the United States a year.
So I'll take this from two angles. As a pro-life person, I actually didn't find it offensive, because if you believe, as I do, that unborn and preborn lives deserve protection, then the slaughter of just under 1 million of them every year for the last almost 50 years is a historic tragedy on par with a Holocaust. From the outside perspective, I get why people would say there's a difference in how people view the preborn as to how people view, say, a 7-year-old who's being killed in the Holocaust. Like the visceral power and evil of the Nazis shoving full-grown human beings and small children into gas chambers can't be compared to a person who, even from a pro-life perspective, may not fully understand the consequences of their own decisions, or from a pro-choice perspective, fully understands the consequences, but just doesn't think that that person is a person. That's actually different. So I understand both sides of it. I wasn't offended by Ye's comments in that way, though, because if you're a pro-life human being, then you do think that what's happening is a great tragedy on scale that involves the dehumanization of an entire class of people.
And I'm inclined to agree with him on that one, and that's just why I don't talk about abortion, because my opinion is
in
very,
his comments, in the jumping from the individual to the
relative
group,
to people I know.
I'd like to ask you, you're one of the most effective people in the world at attacking the left. And sometimes it can slip into attacking the group. Do you worry that that's the same kind of oversimplification that Ye is doing about Jewish people that you can sometimes do?
Who is Ye? You mean, Kanye.
So when I speak about the left, I'm speaking about a philosophy. I'm not really speaking about individual human beings as the leftists like group and then try to name who the members of this individual group are. I also make a distinction between the left and liberals. There are a lot of people who are liberal who disagree with me on taxes, disagree with me on foreign policy, disagree with me on a lot of things. The people who I'm talking about generally, and I talk about the left in the United States, are people who believe that alternative points of view ought to be silenced because they are damaging and harmful simply based on the disagreement. So that's one distinction. The second distinction, again, is when I talk about the right versus the left, typically I'm talking about a battle of competing philosophies. And so I'm not speaking about typically... It would be hard to, if you put a person in front of me and said, is this person of the left or of the right? Having just met them, I wouldn't be able to label them in the same way that if you met somebody in the name of Greenstein, you would immediately got Jew. I mean, if a black person, black person. The adherence to a philosophy makes you a member of a group. If I think the philosophy is bad, that doesn't necessarily mean that you as a person are bad, but it does mean that I think your philosophy is bad.
Yeah, so the grouping is based on the philosophy versus something like a race. Like the color of your skin, or race, as in the case of the Jewish people. It's a different thing. You can be a little bit more nonchalant and careless in attacking a group because it's ultimately attacking a set of ideas.
Well,
right?
I mean, it's really nonchalant in attacking the set of ideas, and I don't know that nonchalant is the way to put it. I tried to be exact when you don't always hit, but if I say that I oppose the communists, right, and then presumably I'm speaking of people who believe in the communist philosophy. Now, the question is whether I'm mislabeling, right? Whether I'm taking something that's not actually
No!
and then shoving them in that group of content
No!
without being accurate.
The dangerous thing is it expands the group, as opposed to you talking about the philosophy. You're throwing everybody who's ever said, I'm curious about communism, I'm curious about socialism. There's like a gradient. It's like to throw something at you. I think Joe Biden said MAGA Republicans, right?
Right.
I think that's
I'm
a very
for it
careless
again.
statement, because the thing you jump to immediately is like all
Everyone who voted
Republicans
for Trump.
for
right.
Trump.
Right.
Versus, I think, in the charitable interpretation, that means a set of ideas.
Yeah,
right?
my actually problem with the MAGA Republicans line from Biden is that he went on in the speech that he made in front of Independence Hall to actually try and define what it meant to be a MAGA Republican who was a threat to the Republic, was the kind of language that he was using. And later on in the speech, he actually suggested, well, there are moderate Republicans, and the moderate Republicans are people who agree with me on like the Inflation Reduction Act. It's like, well, that can't be the dividing line between a MAGA Republican and a moderate. Like a moderate Republican, somebody who agrees with you. You got to name me like a Republican who disagrees with you fairly strenuously, but is not in this group of threats to the Republic. You make that distinction, we can have a fair discussion about whether the idea of election denial, for example, makes somebody, a threat to institutions. That's a conversation that we can have. Then we'll have to discuss how much power they have, what the actual perspective is, delve into it. But I think that he was being overbroad and sort of labeling all of his political enemies under one rubric. Now, again, in politics, this stuff sort of happens all the time. I'm not going to plead clean hands here because I'm sure that I've been inexact. But what would be good in that particular situation is for somebody to sort of read me back the quote, and I'll let you know where I've been inaccurate. I'll try to do that.
And also, you don't shy away from humor and occasional trolling and mockery and all that kind of stuff for the fun, for the chaos, and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I try not to do trollery for trollery's sake, but if the show's not entertaining and not fun, people aren't going to listen. And so, if you can't have fun with politics, the truth about politics is we all take it very seriously because it has some serious ramifications. Politics is Veep; it is not House of Cards. The general rule of politics is that everyone is a moron unless proven otherwise. That virtually everything is done out of stupidity rather than malice. And that if you actually watch politics as a comedy, you'll have a lot more fun. And so the difficulty for me is I take politics seriously, but also I have the ability to sort of flip the switch and suddenly it all becomes incredibly funny. Because it really is. Like, if you just watch it from a pure entertainment perspective and you put aside the fact that it affects hundreds of millions of people, then watching, President Trump being president, I mean, he's one of the funniest humans who's ever lived. Watching Kamala Harris be Kamala Harris and talking about how much she loves Venn diagrams or electric buses. I mean, that's funny stuff. So if I can't make fun of that, then my job becomes pretty morose pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's funny to figure out what is the perfect balance between seeing the humor and the absurdity of the game of it versus taking it seriously enough because it does affect hundreds of millions of people. It's a weird balance to strike. It's like I am afraid with the internet that everything becomes a joke.
I totally agree with this. I will say this. I try to make less jokes about the ideas and more jokes about the people in the same way that I make jokes about myself. I'm pretty self-effacing in terms of my humor. I would say at least half the jokes on my show are about me. When I'm reading ads for Tommy John and they're talking about their no wedgie guarantee, I'll say things like, that would help me in high school because it would have. I mean, just factually speaking. So, if I can speak that way about myself, I feel like everybody else can take it up.
Difficult question.
Not necessarily.
In 2017, there was a mosque shooting in Quebec City. 6 people died, 5 others seriously injured. The 27-year-old gunman consumed a lot of content online and checked Twitter accounts a lot. There's a lot of people, but one of the people who checked quite a lot of is you. 93 times in the month leading up to the shooting. If you could talk to that young man, what would you tell him? And maybe other young men listening to this that have hate in their heart in that same way, what would you tell them?
You're getting it wrong. If anything that I or anyone else in mainstream politics says drives you to violence, you're getting it wrong. You're getting it wrong. Now, again, when it comes to stuff like this, I have a hard and fast rule that I've applied evenly across the spectrum, and that is I never blame people's politics for other people committing acts of violence unless they're actively advocating violence. So when a fan of Bernie Sanders shoots up a congressional baseball game, that is not Bernie Sanders' fault. I may not like his rhetoric. I may disagree with him on everything. Bernie Sanders did not tell somebody to go shoot up a congressional baseball game. When a nutcase in San Francisco goes and hits Paul Pelosi with a hammer, I'm not going to blame Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker, for that. When somebody threatens Brett Kavanaugh, I'm not going to I'm not going to suggest that that was Joe Biden's fault, because it's not Joe Biden's fault. I mean, we can play this game all day long, and I find that the people who are most intensely focused on playing this game are people who tend to oppose the politics of the person, as opposed to actually believing sincerely that this has driven somebody into the arms of the god of violence. But, you know, I have 4.7 million Twitter followers. I have 8 million Facebook followers. I have 5 million YouTube followers. I would imagine that some of them are people who are violent. I would imagine that some of them are people who do evil things or want to do evil things. And I wish that there were a wand that we could wave that would prevent those people from deliberately or mistakenly misinterpreting things as a call to violence. It's just a negative byproduct of the fact that you can reach a lot of people. And so, you know, if somebody could point me to the comment that I suppose, quote unquote, drove somebody to go and literally murder human beings, then I would appreciate it, so I could talk about the comment. But I don't, mainly because I just think that if we remove agency from individuals, and if we blame broad-scale political rhetoric for every act of violence, we're not going to, the people who are going to pay the price are actually the general population, because free speech will go away. If the idea is that things that we say could drive somebody who is unbalanced to go do something evil, the necessary byproduct is hate, is that speech is a form of hate, hate is a form of violence, speech is a form of violence, speech needs to be curbed. And that to me is deeply disturbing.
So definitely that 27-year-old man is the only one responsible for the evil he did. But what if he and others like him are not nutcases?
I need a target.
What if they're people with pain, with anger in their heart? What would you say to them? You are exceptionally influential, and other people like you that speak passionately about ideas. What do you think is your opportunity to alleviate the hate in their heart?
If we're speaking about people who aren't mentally ill and people who are just misguided, I'd say to him the thing that I said to every other young man in the country: you need to find meaning and purpose in forming connections that actually matter, in a belief system that actually promotes general prosperity and promotes helping other people.
I feel like that's pretty good advice.
The message that I most commonly say to young men is it's time for you to grow up, mature, get a job, get married, have a family, take care of the people around you, become a useful part of your community. I've never, at any point in my entire career, suggested violence as a resort to political
Well, that's a very, very offensive
issues.
thing you just said.
And the whole
Ben.
point of having a political conversation is that it's a conversation.
Not
If I
that
didn't think
easy
that
for all
it
of
were worth
us,
trying to
okay?
convince people of my point of view, I wouldn't do what I do for a living.
So violence doesn't solve anything.
No, it doesn't.
I need
As if this wasn't already a difficult conversation.
It's too far away.
Let me ask about Ilhan Omar. You've called out her criticism of Israel policies as anti-Semitic. Is there a difference between criticizing a race of people, like the Jews, and criticizing the policies of a nation, like Israel?
Of course. Of course. I criticize the policies of Israel on a fairly regular basis. I would assume from a different angle than Ilhan Omar does. But yeah, I mean, I criticize the policies of a wide variety of states. And to take an example, I mean, I've criticized Israel's policy in giving control of the Temple Mount to the Islamic Waqf, which effectively prevents anybody except for Muslims from praying up there. I've also criticized the Israeli government for their COVID crackdown. I mean, you can criticize the policies of any government, but that's not what Ilhan Omar does.
Well,
Ilhan Omar doesn't
nice.
actually believe that there should be a state of Israel. She believes that Zionism is racism and that the existence of a Jewish state in Israel is, in and of itself, the great sin. That is a statement she would make about no other people in no other land. She would not say that the French don't deserve a state for the French. She wouldn't say that Somalis wouldn't deserve a state in Somalia. She wouldn't say that Germans don't deserve a state in Germany. She wouldn't say for the 50-plus Islamic states that exist across the world that they don't deserve states of their own. It is only the Jewish state that has fallen under her significant scrutiny. And she also promulgates lies about one specific state in the form of suggesting, for example, that Israel is an apartheid state, which it is most eminently not, considering that the last unity government in Israel included an Arab party, that there are Arabs who sit on the Israeli Supreme Court, and all the rest. And then beyond that, obviously, she's engaged in some of the same sort of anti-Semitic tropes that you heard from Ye, right? The stuff about, it's all about the Benjamins, that American support for Israel is all about the Benjamins. And she's had to be chided by members of her own party about this sort of stuff before.
Can you empathize with the plight of Palestinian people?
Absolutely. I mean,
What?
some of the uglier things that I've ever said in my career are things
You
that I
gotta
said very
go.
early on when I was 17, 18, 19. I started writing a syndicated comment when I was 17. I'm now 38. So virtually all the dumb things, I don't say virtually all, many of the dumb things, the plurality of the dumb things that I've said came from the ages of, I would say, 17 to maybe 23.
Yeah.
And they are rooted, again, in sloppy thinking. I feel terrible for people who have lived under the thumb and currently
Alright, I gotta go take the dog out really fast. For Oh. Welcome back, me. Thank you, me. Anyway.
Currently live under the thumb of Hamas, which is an actual terrorist group, or the Palestinian Authority, which is a corrupt oligarchy that steals money from its people and leaves them in misery, or Islamic Jihad, which is an actual terrorist group. And the basic rule for the region, in my view, is if these groups were willing to make peace with Israel, they would have a state literally tomorrow. And if they are not, then there will be no peace. And it really is that simple. If Israel, the formula it's typically used has become a bit of a bumper sticker, but it happens to be factually correct. If the Palestinians put down their guns tomorrow, there would be a state. If the Israelis put down their guns, there would be no Israel.
You get attacked a lot on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
I gotta ask you about your own psychology. How do you not let that break you mentally? And how do you avoid letting that lead to a resentment of the groups that attack you?
I mean, there are a few sort of practical things that I've done. So, for example, I would say that 4 years ago, Twitter was all-consuming. Twitter is an ego machine, especially the notifications button, right? The notifications button is just people talking about you all the time, and the normal human tendency is, wow, people talking about me, I gotta see what they're saying about me, which is a recipe for insanity. So my wife actually said, Twitter is making your life miserable, you need to take it off your phone. So Twitter is not on my phone. If I want to log on to Twitter, I have to go onto my computer and I have to make the conscious decision to go onto Twitter.
That's what I did
and then
with
take a look at what's going on.
I could just imagine you like there's a
Never
computer in the
going back.
basement. You descend into the check Twitter.
That's pretty much
in
it.
the
I mean,
darkness.
If you look at when I actually tweet, it's generally like in the run-up to recording my show or when I'm prepping for my show later in the afternoon, for example.
That doesn't affect you negatively mentally, like put you in a bad mental space?
Not particularly if it's restricted to sort of what's being watched. Now, I will say that I think the most important thing is you have to surround yourself with a group of people who you trust enough to make serious critiques of you when you're doing something wrong, but also you know that they have your best interests at heart. Because the internet is filled with people who don't have your best interests at heart and who hate your guts, and so you can't really take those critiques seriously or it does wreck you. And the world is also filled with sycophants, right? Then the more successful you become, there are a lot of people who will tell you you're always doing the right thing. I'm very lucky. I got married when I was 24, my wife was 20, so she's known me long before I was famous or wealthy or anything. And so she's a good sounding board. I have a family that's willing to call me out on my bullshit, as you talked to Ye about. I have friends who are able to do that. I try to have open lines of communications with people who I believe have my best interest at heart. But one of the sort of conditions of being friends is that when you see me do something wrong, I'd like for you to let me know that so I can correct it. I don't want to leave bad impressions out there.
The sad thing about the internet, just looking at the critiques you get, I see very few critiques from people that actually want you to succeed, want you to grow. I mean, they're very, they're not sophisticated. They're cruel. The critiques are just, it's not actual critiques. It's just cruelty.
And then that's most of Twitter. I mean, as I said, Twitter is a place to smack and be smacked. I mean, anybody who uses Twitter for an intellectual conversation, I think, is engaging in category error.
I use it to spread love. I think it's still
You're the only one. It's you, and no one else, my friend.
All right. What on that topic? What do you think about Elon buying Twitter? What do you like? What are you hopeful on that front? What would you like to see Twitter improve?
So, I'm very hopeful about Elon buying Twitter. I mean, I think that Elon is significantly more transparent than what has taken place up till now. He seems committed to the idea that he's going to broaden the Overton window to allow for conversations that simply were banned before, everything ranging from efficacy of masks with regard to COVID to whether men can become women and all the rest. A lot of things that would get you banned on Twitter before without any sort of real explanation. It seems like he's dedicated to at least explaining what the standards are going to be and being broader in allowing a variety of perspectives on the outlet, which I think is wonderful. I think that's also why people are freaking out. I think the kind of wailing and gnashing of teeth and wearing of sackcloth and ash by so many members of the legacy media, I think a lot of that is because Twitter essentially was an oligarchy in which certain perspectives were allowed and certain perspectives just were not. And that was part of a broader social media reimposed oligarchy in the aftermath of 2017. So in order to really understand, I think, what it means for Elon to take over Twitter, I think that we have to take a look at sort of the history of media in the United States in 2 minutes or less. The United States, the media for most of its existence up until about 1990, at least from about 1930s until the 1990s, virtually all media was 3 major television networks, a couple major newspapers, and the wire services. Everybody had a local newspaper with the wire services that basically did all the foreign policy and all the national policy. McClatchy, Reuters, AP, AFP, etc. So that monopoly or oligopoly
He's not
existed
really saying
until
anything I haven't heard him say before.
The following is a conversation with Leonard Susskind. He's a
We've
professor
listened
of
to this
theoretical
before, but I'm
physics
gonna listen to it again. This is a good one. Whoops.
of Stanford Institute of Theoretical Physics. He is widely regarded as one of the fathers of string theory and in general as one of the greatest physicists of our time, both as a researcher and an educator. This is the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. Perhaps you noticed that the people I've been speaking with are not just computer scientists, but philosophers, mathematicians, writers, psychologists, physicists, and soon other disciplines. To me, AI is much bigger than deep learning, bigger than computing. It is our civilization's journey into understanding the human mind and creating echoes of it in the machine. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, give it 5 stars on iTunes, support it on Patreon, or simply connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman, spelled Fridman. And now, here's my conversation with Leonard Susskind. You worked and were friends with Richard Feynman. How has he influenced you, changed you as a physicist and thinker?
I think what I saw was somebody who could do physics in this deeply intuitive way. His style was almost to close his eyes and visualize the phenomena that he was thinking about, and through visualization outflank the highly mathematical and very, very sophisticated technical arguments that people would use. I think that was also natural to me, but I saw somebody who was actually successful at it, who could do physics in a way that I regarded as simpler, more direct, more intuitive. And while I don't think he changed my way of thinking, I do think he validated it. He made me look at it and say, yeah, that's something you can do and get away with. Practically, you can get away with it.
So, do you find yourself, whether you're thinking about quantum mechanics or black holes or string theory, using intuition as a first step or step throughout, using visualization?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
1 moment, right?
I tend not to think about the equations. I tend not to think about the symbols. I tend to try to visualize the phenomena themselves. And then when I get an insight that I think is valid, I might try to convert it to mathematics. But I'm not a natural mathematician, or I'm good enough at it. But I'm not a great mathematician. So for me, the way of thinking about physics is first intuitive, first visualization, scribble a few equations maybe, but then try to convert it to mathematics. Experience is that other people are better at converting it to mathematics than I am.
And yet you've worked very counterintuitive ideas. So
that's true.
How do you visualize something counterintuitive? How do you dare?
By rewiring your brain in new ways. Yeah, quantum mechanics is not intuitive. Very little of modern physics is intuitive. Intuitive, well, what does intuitive mean? It means the ability to think about it with basic classical physics, the physics that we evolved with, throwing stones, splashing water, whatever it happens to be.
Space-time!
Quantum physics, general relativity, quantum field theory are deeply unintuitive in that way. But after time and getting familiar with these things, you develop new intuitions. I always said you rewire. And it's to the point where me and many of my friends, can think more easily quantum mechanically than we can classically. We've gotten so used to it.
I mean, yes, our neural wiring in our brain is such that we understand rocks and stones and water and so on.
It sort of evolved for that.
It's almost more intuitive.
Do you think it's possible to create a wiring of neuron-like state devices that more naturally understand quantum mechanics, understand wave function, understand these weird things.
Well, I'm
that-
not sure. I think many of us have evolved the ability to think quantum mechanically to some extent, but that doesn't mean you can think like an electron. That doesn't mean another example. Forget for a minute quantum mechanics. Just visualizing 4-dimensional space, or 5-dimensional space, or 6-dimensional space. I think we're fundamentally wired to visualize 3 dimensions. I can't even visualize 2 dimensions or 1 dimension without thinking about it as embedded in 3 dimensions. If I want to visualize a line, I think of the line as being a line in 3 dimensions. Or I think of the line as being a line on a piece of paper, with a piece of paper being in 3 dimensions. I never seem to be able to, in some abstract and pure way, visualize in my head the 1 dimension, the 2 dimension, the 4 dimensions, the 5 dimensions, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. The reason is I think our neural wiring is just set up for that. On the other hand, we do learn ways to think about 5, 6, 7 dimensions. We learn ways, we learn mathematical ways, and we learn ways to visualize them, but they're different. And so, yeah, I think we do rewire ourselves. Whether we can ever completely rewire ourselves to be completely comfortable with these concepts, I doubt.
I'm out of
So
breath.
that it's completely natural.
To where it's completely natural.
So I'm sure there's somewhat, you could argue, creatures that live in a 2-dimensional space.
Yeah, maybe
And-
there are.
And well, it's romanticizing the notion that, of course, we're all
Whoa
living, as
there,
far as we
Nelly.
know, in 3-dimensional space. But how do those creatures imagine 3D space?
Well, probably the way we imagine 4D, by using some mathematics and some equations and some tricks.
Okay, so
Math
jumping
magic.
back to Feynman just for a second, he had a little bit of an ego.
Yes.
Well, do you think ego is powerful or dangerous in science?
I think both. Both. I think you have to have both arrogance and humility. You have to have the arrogance to say, I can do this. Nature is difficult. Nature is very, very hard. I'm smart enough. I can do it.
I need to get closer.
I can win the battle with nature. On the other hand, I think you also have to have the humility to know that you're very likely to be wrong on any given occasion. Everything you're thinking could suddenly change. Young people can come along and say things you won't understand, and you'll be lost and flabbergasted. So I think it's a combination of both. You better recognize that you're very limited, and you better be able to say to yourself, I'm not so limited that I can't win this battle with nature. It takes a special kind of person who can manage both of those, I would say.
And I would say there's echoes of that in your own work. A little bit of ego, a little bit of outside of the box, humble thinking.
Oh, I hope so.
So was there a time
I don't have a target.
where
I
you
need to target something. first.
you looked at yourself and asked, am I completely wrong about this?
Oh, yeah.
I don't have
About the whole
target.
thing or about
I need
specific
to
things?
target something.
The whole
No.
thing. What do you wait, which whole thing?
Me and my ability to do this thing.
Oh, those kinds
wow.
of doubts.
Those
Well, first
kinds
of all, did you have those kinds of doubts?
No, I had different kind of doubts. I came from a very working class background, and I was uncomfortable in academia for a long time. But they weren't doubts about my ability or they were just the discomfort in being in an environment that my family hadn't participated in. I knew nothing about as a young person. I didn't learn that there was such a thing called physics until I was almost 20 years old. So I did have certain kind of doubts, but not about my ability. I don't think I was too worried about whether I would succeed or not. I never felt this insecurity, am I ever going to get a job? That had never occurred to me that I wouldn't.
Maybe you could speak a little bit to this sense of what is academia, because I too feel bit
Well,
uncomfortable in it.
Mm-hmm.
we all do at
There's
times.
something I can't put quite into words.
It's
what
an
you have
uncomfortable field.
that's not.
I hate
Doesn't.
to say.
If we call it music, you
Not
play
all
a
the
different kind of
time.
music than a lot of academia. How have you joined this
Okay, very
orchestra? How do you think about it?
I don't know that I thought about it as much as I just felt it.
Yeah.
You know, thinking is one thing, feeling is another thing. I felt like an outsider until a certain age when I suddenly found myself the ultimate insider in academic physics. And
Wait, we won? No, we
that was a
didn't.
sharp
We
transition,
lost.
and I wasn't a young man. I was probably 50 years old,
So you were never quite. It was a phase transition. You were never quite
pretty much.
in the middle.
Yeah, that's right. I wasn't. I always felt a little bit of an outsider. In the beginning, a lot an outsider. My way of thinking was different. My approach to
What the hell
mathematics
is
was
that?
different, but also my social background that I came from was different. You know, these days, half the young people I meet, their parents were professors.
Right.
Right? That was not my case. So, yeah. But then all of a sudden, at some point, I found myself at the very much the center of, maybe not the only one at the
I
center,
don't
but
have a
certainly
target.
one of the people in the center of a certain kind of physics. And all that went away. I mean, it went away in a flash.
So maybe a little bit with Feynman, but in general, how do you develop ideas? Do you work through ideas alone? Do you
I can't
brainstorm with
attack my
others?
target.
Oh, both.
I
Both,
need
very
to target
definitely
something
both.
first. I need a target.
The younger time,
need to
I
target
spent
something
more
first.
time with myself. Now, because I'm at Stanford, because I have a lot of ex-students and people who are interested in the same thing I am, I spend a good deal of time, almost on a daily basis, interacting, brainstorming, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important part. I spend less time probably completely self-focused and with a piece of paper and just sitting there staring at it.
What are your hopes for quantum computers? So
Yeah.
machines that are based on, that have some elements of leverage quantum mechanical ideas.
Yeah. It's not just leveraging quantum mechanical ideas. You can simulate quantum systems on a classical computer. Simulate them means solve the Schrodinger equation for them, or solve the equations of quantum mechanics on a computer, on a classical computer. But the classical computer is not a quantum mechanical system itself. Oh, of course it is. Everything's made of quantum mechanics, but it's not functioning. It's not functioning as a quantum system. It's just solving equations. The quantum computer is truly a quantum system which is actually doing the things that you're programming it to do. You want to program a quantum field theory? If you do it in classical physics, that program is not actually functioning in the computer as a quantum field theory. It's just solving some equations.
Let's try this.
Physically, it's not doing the things that the quantum system would do. The quantum computer is really a quantum mechanical system which is actually carrying out the quantum operations. You can measure it at the end. It intrinsically satisfies the uncertainty principle. It is limited in the same way that quantum systems are limited by uncertainty and so forth. And it really is a quantum system. That means that what you're doing when you program something for a quantum system is you're actually building a real version of the system. The limits of a classical computer. Classical computers are enormously limited when it comes to the quantum systems. They're enormously limited because you probably heard this before, but in order to store the amount of information that's in a quantum state
I
of
don't have a target.
400 spins, that's not very many. 400 I can put in my pocket, 400 pennies in my pocket. To be able to simulate the quantum state of 400 elementary quantum systems, qubits we call them. To do that would take more information than can possibly be stored in the entire universe if it were packed so tightly that you couldn't pack any more in. 400 qubits. On the other hand, if your quantum computer is composed of 400 qubits, it can do everything 400 qubits can do.
What is this supposed to be?
What kind of space, if you just intuitively think about the space of algorithms that unlocks for us? So there's a whole complexity theory around classical computers measuring the running time of things, NP, so on. What kind of algorithms, just intuitively, do you think it unlocks for us?
Okay, so we know that there are a handful of algorithms that can seriously beat classical computers and which can have exponentially more power. This is a mathematical statement. Nobody's exhibited this in the laboratory. It's a mathematical statement. We know that's true, but it also seems more and more that the number of such things is very limited. Only very, very special problems exhibit that much advantage for a quantum computer. A standard problem. In my mind, as far as I can tell, the great power of quantum computers will actually be to simulate quantum systems.
Almost got him.
If you're interested in a certain quantum system and it's too hard to simulate classically, you simply build a version of the same system. You build a version of it, you build a model of it that's actually functioning as a system, you run it, and then you do the same thing you would do to the quantum system, you make measurements on it, quantum measurements on it. The advantage is you can run it much slower.
Whoops.
You could say, why bother? Why not just use the real system? Why not just do experiments on the real system? Well, real systems are kind of limited. You can't change them. You can't manipulate them. You can't slow them down so that you can poke into them. You can't modify them in arbitrary kinds of ways to see what would happen if I change the system a little bit. So I think that quantum computers will be extremely valuable in understanding quantum systems.
At the lowest level, the fundamental laws.
Yeah. They're actually satisfying the same laws as the systems that they're simulating. Okay, so on the one hand, you have things like factoring. Factoring is the great thing of quantum computers, factoring large numbers. That doesn't seem that much to do with quantum mechanics. It seems to be almost a fluke that a quantum computer can solve the factoring problem in a short time. So those problems seem to be extremely special.
Dang
rare,
it, I almost got away.
and it's not clear to me that there's going to be a lot of them. On the other hand, there are a lot of quantum systems. Chemistry, there's solid state physics, there's material science, there's quantum gravity, there's all kinds of quantum field theory. And some of these are actually turning out to be applied sciences as well as very fundamental sciences. So we probably will run out of the ability to solve equations for these things. Solve equations by the standard methods of pencil and paper, solve the equations by the method of classical computers. And so what we'll do is we'll build versions of these systems, run them, and run them under controlled circumstances where we can change them, manipulate them, make measurements on them, and find out all the things we want to know.
So in finding out the things we want to know about very small systems, right? Is there something we can also find out about the macro level? About something about the function,
Get away from me, get away
of our brain,
get away from me, get away from me.
biological systems, the stuff that's about 1 meter in size versus much, much smaller.
Well, what all the excitement is about among the people that I interact with is understanding black holes. Black holes are big things. They are many, many degrees of freedom. There is another kind of quantum system that is big. It's a large quantum computer. And one of the things we've learned is that the physics of large quantum computers is in some ways similar to the physics of large quantum black holes. And we're using that
I
relationship.
didn't even know that there were
Now you asked,
black holes.
You didn't ask about quantum computers or systems.
I probably did,
you
but
didn't
I
ask
didn't
about
just, or just
black holes. You asked about
think.
brains.
Yeah, about stuff that's in the middle of the two.
It's different.
So black holes are, there's something fundamental about black holes that feels to be very different than brains.
Yes. And they also function in a very quantum mechanical way.
Right.
Okay. It is, first of all, unclear to me, but of course it's unclear to me. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't even have very many friends who are neuroscientists. I would like to have more friends who are neuroscientists. I just don't run into them very often.
I'll
Among
be
the
your
few
friend.
neuroscientists I've ever talked about this, they are pretty convinced that the brain functions classically. That it is not intrinsically a quantum mechanical system, or it doesn't make use of the special features, entanglement, coherent superposition. Are they right? I don't know. I sort of hope they're wrong, just because I like the romantic idea that the brain is a quantum system.
Yeah.
But I think probably not.
I need to
The other thing,
No, they
big
are.
systems can be composed of lots of little systems.
No, I don't know that, but I suspect.
The materials that we work with and so forth can be large systems, a large piece of material, but they're big and they're made out of quantum systems. Now, one of the things that's been happening over the last a good number of years is we're discovering materials and quantum systems which function much more quantum mechanically than we imagine. Topological insulators, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. Those are macroscopic systems, but they just superconductors. Superconductors have a lot of quantum mechanics in them. You can have a large chunk of superconductor. So it's a big piece of material. On the other hand, its functioning and its properties depend very, very strongly on quantum mechanics. And to analyze them, you need the tools of quantum mechanics.
If we can go on to black holes, and looking at the universe as a information processing system, as a computer, as a giant computer,
It's a giant computer.
what's the power of thinking of the universe as an information processing system, and what is perhaps its use, besides the mathematical use of discussing black holes and your famous debates and ideas around that, to human beings, life in general as information processing systems?
Well, all systems are information processing systems. You poke them, they change a little bit, they evolve. All systems are information
So
processing
there's no
systems.
extra magic to us humans? It certainly feels, consciousness and intelligence feels like magic.
It sure does.
Where does it emerge from? If we look at it, information processing, what are the emergent phenomena that come from viewing the world as an information processing system?
Here is what I think. And my thoughts are not worth much in this. If you ask me about physics, my thoughts may be worth something.
Yes.
If you ask me about this, I'm not sure my thoughts are worth anything. But as I said earlier, I think when we do introspection, when we imagine doing introspection and try to figure out what it is when we do when we're thinking, I think we get it wrong. I'm pretty sure we get it wrong. Everything I've heard about the way the brain functions is so counterintuitive. For example, you have neurons which detect vertical lines. You have different neurons which detect lines at 45 degrees. You have different neurons. I never imagined that there were whole circuits which were devoted to vertical lines in my brain.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be the way my brain works. My brain seems to work if I put my finger up vertically, or if I put it horizontally, or if I put it this way or that way. It seems to me it's the same circuits that are. It's not the way it works. The way the brain is compartmentalized seems to be very, very different than what I would have imagined if I were just doing psychological introspection about how things work. My conclusion is that we won't get it right that way. That how will we get it right? I think maybe computer scientists will get it right eventually. I don't think they're anywhere near it. I don't even think they're thinking about it. But by computer, eventually we will build machines, perhaps, which are complicated enough
Whoa.
and partly engineered, partly evolved, maybe evolved by
happening.
machine learning and so forth. This machine learning is very interesting.
It is.
By machine
Oh,
learning, we will
hello.
evolve systems,
Are you here?
and we
I
may
am.
start
Sorry, I
to
just saw
discover
that.
mechanisms
I don't know if
that
you're still here.
that
That's an
have
interesting name.
implications for how we think and for what this
My
consciousness
apologies
thing is
for
all
missing
about.
that.
And we'll be able to do experiments on them
How am I?
and perhaps answer
I am
questions
doing as well as the universe will
that we
allow. How are
can't
you?
possibly answer by introspection.
So that's a really interesting point. You've in many cases, if we look at even the string theory, when you first think about a system, it seems really complicated, like the human brain. And through some basic reasoning,
How are
and
you?
trying to
Did I already ask
discover
that?
fundamental, low-level behavior of the system, you
very
find
good.
out that it's actually much simpler.
Well, that
Do
is
you,
good to
one,
hear.
have you? Is that generally the process? And two, do you have that also hope for biological systems as well, for all the kinds of stuff we're studying at the human level?
Of course, physics always begins by trying to find the simplest version of something and analyze it. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of examples where physics
Whoa
has
there, Nellies.
taken very complicated systems,
Where
analyzed
are
them,
these
and found simplicity in
peoples?
them, for
I
sure.
don't want to.
I said superconductors before.
Get away
It's
from
an
my
obvious
friend,
one. A
or move away from
superconductor
my
seems
friend,
like
I
a
mean.
monstrously complicated thing with all sorts of
Oh
crazy
dear, how dare
electrical
they?
properties,
How dare they?
magnetic
How
properties,
dare
and so
they?
forth.
How dare
And when
they?
it finally is boiled down to its simplest elements, it's a very simple quantum mechanical phenomenon called spontaneous symmetry breaking, and
Whoops.
which we, in other contexts, we learned
Whoops.
about and we're very familiar with. So yeah, I mean, yes, we do take complicated things, make them
I don't have
simple.
a target.
But what we don't want to do is take things which are intrinsically complicated and fool ourselves into thinking that we can make them simple. We don't
So
want to
close.
make, I don't know who said this, but we don't want to make them
Oh,
simpler
well,
than they
thank
really
you.
are.
Right.
Thank
Okay.
you. I
Is the
appreciate
brain a
that.
thing
Welcome to the
which
Scriber experience.
ultimately functions by some simple rules? Or is it just complicated?
In terms of artificial intelligence, nobody really knows what are the limits of our current approaches in
Thank you for
machine learning.
appreciating.
How do we create human level intelligence? It seems that there's a lot of very smart physicists
Yeah.
who perhaps oversimplify the nature of intelligence and think of it as information processing, and therefore there doesn't seem to be any theoretical reason why we can't artificially
guilty of that.
create human level or superhuman level intelligence. In fact, the reasoning goes, if you create human level intelligence, the same approach you just used to create human level intelligence should allow you to create superhuman level intelligence very easily, exponentially. So what do you think that way of thinking that comes from physicists
Oh,
is all
wait.
about?
Was I
I
supposed
wish
to
I knew,
leave?
but there's a particular reason why I wish I knew.
Is it still in
I
progress?
have a second job. I consult for Google. Not for Google, for Google X. I am the senior academic advisor to a group of machine learning physicists. Now that sounds
Wait, are they
crazy because
still
I know
going?
nothing about the subject.
There's no way they're still going.
I know very little about the subject.
I'm a little high
On the other
right
hand,
now.
I'm good at giving advice.
Oh,
so I
wow,
give them
they're still
advice on
going.
things. Anyway,
Look at that.
I see these young physicists who are approaching the
Look at
machine
this,
learning problem.
pros.
There is a real machine learning problem, namely, why does it work as well as
I
it
can
does?
only hope to one day.
Nobody really seems to
warlock, too.
understand
What's
why
that one?
it is capable of doing the kind of generalizations that it does and so forth.
A
And,
rogue and a warlock.
There are three groups of people who have thought about this. There are the engineers. The engineers are incredibly smart, but they tend not to think as hard
thank
about
you.
why the thing is working as much as they do how to use it. Obviously, they provided a lot of data, and it is they who demonstrated that machine learning can work much better than you had any right to expect. The machine learning systems are systems. The systems not too different than the kind of systems that physicists study. There's not all that much difference between in the structure of the mathematics. Physically, yes, but in the structure of the mathematics, between a tensor network designed to describe a quantum system on the one hand, and the kind of networks that are used in machine learning.
Someone talking on broadcast,
So,
does this sound come
There
with the game? No.
more and more, I think,
No.
young
This is this. Thank you for asking that though, because that gives me a chance to cite my source. But yes, this is the YouTube video that we're watching. It's just a Lex Freeman Leo Susskind interview we were listening to the Ben Shapiro one, but kind of as a troll. But no, I don't know. It was unsuccessful, and Ben Shapiro didn't really have anything to say that I haven't already heard him say. And to be fair, I didn't get further than like 30 minutes through. But yeah. Yes. But yeah, that is what we're listening to.
Physicists are
cite your
being
sources.
drawn to this field of machine learning. Some very, very good ones. I work with a number of very good ones, not on machine learning, but on having lunch.
On having lunch?
Right.
Yeah.
And I can tell you they are super smart.
Yes.
They don't seem to be so arrogant about their physics backgrounds that they think they can do things that nobody else can do. But the physics way of thinking, I think, will add great value to, or will bring value to the machine learning. I believe it will. And I think it already has.
At what time
That
scale
is like
do you
what
think
I would like to
predicting
be
the future
involved
becomes
in.
useless?
Peppered with
In
geometric
your
algebra.
long experience in being surprised at new discoveries.
I thought you might have been.
Sometimes a
Where
day,
from the Middle East are you from?
sometimes 20 years.
What,
There are things
is that
which I
Arabic?
thought
I need a target.
Or
we
is
were
it
very
some other
far from
language?
understanding, which practically in a snap of the fingers or a blink of the
Social
eye
dis?
suddenly
What?
became
No,
understood.
no.
Completely
All are
surprising to
welcome
me.
here.
There are other things which I looked at and I said, we're not going to understand these things for 500 years, in particular quantum gravity. The scale for that was 20 years, 25 years. And we understand a lot, and we don't understand it completely now by any means, but
Very, very cool.
I thought it was 500 years to
I've
make
known
any
some Arabic
progress.
people.
It turned out to be very, very far from that.
But
It
I
turned out to be
realize,
more like
you
20 or
know,
25 years from the time when I thought it was 500 years.
That's like saying I've known
So
some
if we
white
may,
people.
can we jump around
There's many different
quantum gravity, some basic ideas in physics?
flavors.
What
As
is the dream
tradition,
of string
we are all
theory
individuals.
mathematically?
I
What is the
apologize.
hope?
I
Where
don't
does
mean
it
to go on
come
a
from?
soapbox
What
about
problem
that.
is it
I
trying to
just feel
solve?
the automatic
I don't think the
need
dream
to
of
do
string
it
theory is
just
any
on
different
default.
than the dream of fundamental theoretical
I don't
physics
mean to
altogether.
sound preachy and be
Understanding a
saying
unified
things that
theory
are
of
kind
everything, yeah.
obvious.
I don't
just-
like
it's-
thinking of
it's
string
just the
theory as a
it's just
subject
that
unto itself, with people called
situation
string
over
theorists
here
who are the
in my
practitioners
country
of this thing
with
called string
regards
theory.
to
I much prefer to think
need
of them as
not
theoretical
getting
physicists
fucked
trying to answer deep
by
fundamental questions about nature, in particular gravity,
whatever
and its
platform
connection
you're
with
streaming on.
quantum mechanics,
saying something
and who at the present
stupid,
time find string
which
theory
I
a useful
do
tool,
constantly.
rather than saying there's this subject called string theorist. I don't like being referred to as a
Yeah.
string theorist.
Yes.
What country are you
But
from?
as a tool, is it useful to think about our nature in multiple dimensions, the strings vibrating?
I believe it is useful. I'll tell you what the main use of it has been up till now. Well, it has had a number of main uses. Originally, string theory was invented, and I know I was right at the spot where it was being invented, literally. And it was being invented to understand hadrons. Hadrons are subnuclear particles, protons, neutrons, mesons. And at that time,
Do y'all
the
play
late
WoW
60s,
over there?
early 70s, it was
I
clear from
apologize if that's
experiment
kind of like
that
a
these particles
stupid
called
question.
hadrons could
Stupid
vibrate,
American.
could rotate,
I apologize if that's
could
a
do
stupid
all
joke.
the things that a little
This is all I have.
closed string can do. And it
Ah, you're from Iraq.
was and is
I knew an Iraqi.
valid and correct theory of these hadrons. It's been experimentally tested, and that is
I
a
did.
done deal.
True story. I won't dox him.
It had a second life as a theory of gravity. The same
He was a
basic
character.
mathematics, except on a very, very much smaller distance scale.
Or was he from
the
Afghanistan?
objects of
No, I think it was Iraq.
gravitation
Up here.
are
It's been a while.
19 orders of
Anyway, I
magnitude smaller than a
apologize.
proton.
What am I apologizing
But the
for?
same
Oh.
mathematics turned up. The same mathematics turned up. What has been its value? Its value is that it's mathematically rigorous
Well,
in
thank
many
you
ways
for
and enabled
giving me your
us
time.
to find to find mathematical structures which have both quantum mechanics and gravity with rigor. We can test
And
out
disclaimer,
ideas.
I
We
apologize in
can test out
advance.
ideas. We can't test them in the laboratory.
I am an
They're-
idiot.
They're 19 orders of magnitude too small, the things that we're interested in. But we can
And,
test them out mathematically and
You know, it's just
analyze
how it
their
is.
internal consistency.
I would blame it on
now-
cable, but it's not even cable. It's just
40
the
years
way
ago,
I am.
35 years ago,
I
and
don't
so
mean to
forth,
be an idiot,
people
so I
very,
apologize
very
in
much
advance if I say
questioned
anything.
the consistency between
offensive.
gravity and quantum mechanics.
Unless I
Stephen
mean to be
Hawking was very
offensive,
famous
but
for
that's
it.
not really something I do.
Rightly
that would
so.
be fair for me. However, never underestimate
Now,
one's
nobody
your
questions that
capacity for
consistency
maliciousness.
anymore.
That is
They
something
don't
I
because we
learned.
have mathematically precise
I
string
want to
theories
stop learning that
which
lesson.
contain
I
both
don't like it
gravity
when
and
I
quantum
conduct
mechanics in a
malicious
consistent way.
behavior.
So it's provided that that certainty that quantum mechanics and gravity can coexist. That's not a small thing. It's a very
huge
big
thing.
It's a huge thing.
Einstein would be proud.
Einstein, he might be appalled. I don't know. He didn't like quantum mechanics very much,
Yeah.
but he would certainly be struck by it.
Yeah.
I think that may be, at this time,
I'm
its biggest
successful at being
contribution to physics
unsuccessful.
in illustrating
But thank you.
almost definitively that quantum mechanics and gravity are very closely related and not inconsistent with each other.
Is there a possibility of something deeper, more profound, that
This
still
battleground
is
again.
consistent with string theory, but is deeper?
Whoops.
That is to be found.
Well, you could ask the same thing about quantum mechanics. Is there something?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think string theory is just an example of a quantum mechanical system.
I don't really
that
know anything about string theory.
Contains
I'm not
both
gonna lie.
gravitation and quantum mechanics. So, is there something underlying quantum mechanics?
Perhaps something deterministic.
Perhaps something deterministic. My friend
How old do you think I
Gerard
am?
't Hooft, whose name you may know, he's a
Oh,
very
no,
famous
here we go.
physicist. Dutch, not as famous as he should be, but
Hard to spell his name. So
it's hard to say his name.
Yeah.
No, it's easy to spell his name. Apostrophe. He's the only person I know whose name begins with an apostrophe. And he's one of my heroes in physics. And he's a little younger than me, but he's nevertheless one of my heroes. The Tuft believes that there is some substructure to the world which is classical in character, deterministic in character, which somehow, by some mechanism that he has a hard time spelling out, emerges as quantum mechanics. I don't.
The wave function is somehow emergent.
The wave function and the whole, not just the wave function, but the whole the whole thing that goes with quantum mechanics, uncertainty, entanglement, all these things are emergent.
You think quantum
Whoa
mechanics
there,
is the bottom
Nelly.
of the well? Is the
Well, here I think is where you have to be humble. Here's where humility comes. I don't think anybody should say anything is the bottom of the well at this time. As I think we can reasonably say,
Oh, whoops.
I can reasonably
Whoops,
say
whoops,
when I look into the well,
I
I
was too
can't
busy
see
trying to
past
be an
quantum
idiot.
mechanics. I don't see any reason for it to
It's
be anything
okay if you
beyond
guess
quantum
wrong.
mechanics.
I do it to
think
myself.
Tuft has asked very interesting
Be
and
honest,
deep
though.
questions. I don't like his answers.
well? Again, let me ask: if we look at the deepest nature of reality, with whether it's deterministic or when observed as probabilistic, what does that mean for our human level of ideas of free will? Is there any connection whatsoever?
Thank you for
from
being here,
this
by the way. I
perception,
don't know how to
perhaps
pronounce
illusion
that.
of free will that
I'm
we
just
have,
gonna call
and the
you
fundamental
Arabic
nature
person.
of reality.
The only thing I can say is I am puzzled by that as much as you are.
Or I could
The
say
illusion of it,
Iraq.
The illusion of consciousness, the illusion of free will, the illusion of
For some
self.
reason, that one sounds a bit bold. I can't.
Does
I
that
don't really know if
connect
it is
to-
there.
How can a physical system do that? And
I don't have enough
And I am as puzzled as
experience with the
anybody.
matter
There's echoes of it
to
in
know
the
the politically
observer.
correct thing.
yeah,
So do you understand what it
diplomatic
means to be an
thing,
observer?
rather.
I understand it at a technical level. An observer
I
is
ha-
a
if
system with
you
enough
can go to
degrees
the
of freedom
Renzo
that it
Scriber
can record
Instagram.
information and which can become entangled
Yeah.
with the thing that it's measuring.
I have
Entanglement
that.
is the key.
But I don't
And a
respond to
system
DMs
which we
on there or
call
anything.
an
I don't even
apparatus
look
or
at
an
them.
observer, same thing.
So don't even
Interacts
try.
with the system that it's observing. It doesn't just look at it. It becomes physically entangled with it. And it's that
I haven't
entanglement
uploaded
that we
anything
call
to
an
those
observation
Instagram
or
since
a measurement.
I don't even know how long.
Now, does that satisfy me personally as an observer? Yes and no. I find it very satisfying that we have a mathematical representation of what it means to observe a system.
You are observing stuff right now.
Yeah.
The conscious
we are.
level.
Right.
Do you think there's echoes of that kind of entanglement in our macro scale?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. We're entangled with, quantum mechanically entangled with everything in this room.
You and me,
If we
an
weren't,
Arabic person,
then
we're
we'd just-
entangled now.
well,
Now that we
wouldn't
know
be
each
observing
other.
it.
Isn't
But
that
on the other
fun?
hand, you can ask, do I really?
If you stick around, you can
Am I
become
really
entangled with
comfortable
all
with
the
it?
other
And I'm
people
uncomfortable
around
with
the
it in the
world
same way that I can
that are
never get
part of the
comfortable with
scriber
5 dimensions.
experience.
My
Or not,
brain
no
isn't
pressure.
wired for it.
It's not
Are you
like
comfortable with 4
everybody
dimensions?
else doesn't have foreign
A
people.
little bit more because I can always
Foreign
imagine the
relative to
4th
who,
dimension
though?
is time.
Oh,
So the arrow of time.
we're
Are
all
you comfortable with that arrow?
Earthlings.
Do you think time is an
Earthlings.
emergent phenomena or is it fundamental to nature?
That is a big question in physics right now. All the physics that we do, or at least that the people that I am comfortable with talking to, my
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
my friends. Well, we all ask the same question that you just asked. Space, we have a pretty good idea, is emergent, and it emerges out of entanglement and other things.
I don't
Time
know why I'm going
always
after
seems
that.
to be built into our equations as just what Newton pretty much would have thought. Newton, modified a little bit by Einstein, would have called time. And mostly in our equations, it is not emergent. Time in physics is completely symmetric, forward and backward.
Symmetric. So you don't really need to think about the arrow of time for most physical phenomena.
Most microscopic phenomena, no. It's only when the phenomena involves systems which are big enough for thermodynamics
Well,
to become
understand
important,
English, only
for
writing.
entropy to become important.
Oh, but I
For
have to play my
a
game.
small system, entropy is not a good concept. And entropy is something which emerges out of large numbers. It's a probabilistic idea, it's a statistical idea, and it's a thermodynamic idea. Thermodynamics requires lots and lots and lots of little substructures. Okay? So it's not until you emerge at the thermodynamic level that there's an arrow of time. Do we understand it? Yeah, I think we understand better than most people think they most people say they think we understand it. Yeah, I think we understand it. It's a statistical idea.
You mean like second law of thermodynamics, entropy,
Yeah.
and so on?
Yeah.
So
Pick a pack of cards and you fling it in the air and you look what happens to it.
Yeah,
It
but
gets random.
we understand
It doesn't go from random to simple. It goes from simple to random.
But
Whoop.
do you think it ever breaks down?
What I think you can do is in a laboratory setting, you can take a system which is somewhere intermediate between being small and being large, and make it go backward. A thing which looks like it only wants to go forward because of statistical, mechanical reasons, because of the second law. You can very, very
Whoa,
carefully
no.
manipulate it to make it run backward. I don't think you can take an egg, Humpty Dumpty, who fell on the floor,
Yeah.
and reverse that.
Do you
But you can, in a very
do you
controlled
play
situation, you
WoW
can take systems
in your country?
which appear to be evolving statistically
go.
toward randomness, stop them, reverse them, and make them go back.
What's the intuition behind that? How do we do that? How do we reverse it? You're saying a closed system.
Yeah, pretty much closed system, yes.
Did you just say that time travel is possible?
No, I didn't say time travel is possible. I said you can make a system go backward.
In time.
And you can make it go back, you can make it reverse its steps, you can make it reverse its trajectory.
Yeah. How do we do it? What's the
Whoops, I
intuition
didn't mean
there?
to
Does it have?
waste
Is it
that.
just a fluke
I didn't mean to waste that.
thing that we can do at a small scale in the lab that doesn't have?
Well, what I'm saying is you can do it on a little bit better than a small scale. You can certainly do it with a simple small system. Small systems don't have any sense of the arrow of time. Atoms, no sense of an arrow of time. They're completely reversible. It's only when you have, the second law of thermodynamics is the law of large numbers.
So you can break the law because it's not.
You can break it.
What?
I need to get closer.
Hold on, y'all. I want to make note of that.
I need a target.
Whoops, I wasted that again. That's okay though. I get excited.
I need to target something first. I'm out of range. It's too far away. I need to get closer. I don't have a target. I need to target something first. I'm out of range. I need a target. I need to get closer. I don't have a target.
Well,
It's too far away. I'm out of range. I need to get closer. It's too far away.
whoops.
I'm out of range. I need to get closer. I'm out of range. I need to target something first. I need a target. It's too far away. I don't have a target. I need to target something first. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target.
Whoops. Whoa there, Nelly. Oh, that's our friend. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that.
I need to target something first. I need a target. I need to get closer. I need to target something first. It's too far away.
Where is my mouse? There's my mouse.
I'm out of range. I need to get closer. Too far away. I'm out of range.
Backup has arrived. Dispose of those that remain.
I need to get closer. Too far away. I don't have a target. I'm out of range.
Where are these people?
I need to target something first. I don't have a target. I need to get closer. I'm out of range. It's too far away. I'm out of range. I need a target. I need to target something first.
Okay, whatever.
It's too far away. I need to get closer. I don't have a target. I'm out of range. I
Do
need a
do
target.
do. Sorry, the chat got minimized. No. What the fuck, computer? Hold on, y'all.
I need to target something first. Too far away. closer.
Why isn't my shift 1 working? That's very much bothering me.
It's too far away. I need to get closer.
Ah. Dude, what the fuck? Oh, thank you. I forgot that I had a TikTok channel. Yes, this name is WoW. Or World of Warcraft. You play everything. My TikTok channel. Thank you for reminding me that exists. Why is this like this? There we go. I don't know what that was. Thank you for your patience. I still don't know why this isn't working. Maybe it's because I'm playing in a battleground? I don't know. Hello? What is that? Aw, I'm streaming and I'm smiling. Did Paul give you the thing?
I need a target.
No, no!
I need to target something first. I don't
But
have
the
a
thing's
target.
gonna die. Yeah.
I need a target. I need to target something first. I don't have a target.
Alright. Shit, shit, shit.
I'm out of range.
Yeah, no, I'm just playing WoW. I'm just talking to a random alleged
It's
Iraqi
too far away.
on YouTube.
I'm out of range.
But yeah, you're more than welcome to join. I saw you you got on with Blizzard the other day. What? Somebody got on it
I
with
need
your
to-
account. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, anyway, I can't. Ow, 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 ow. Alright, yeah, that sounds good.
I don't have a target.
Anyway, my apologies, y'all. My apologies.
I need to get closer. I need a target. I need to target something first.
Why is this not working? What the? Nope, still not working. Come on.
It's too
Don't do
far.
this to me. I know what I can do. Where are they?
I need a target. I don't have a target.
Nope.
I
need my number
target
one to
something
work.
First. I need a target.
All right,
I
is it
need to
working? Is it
target
working?
something
Nope.
first. I don't have a target. I need to target something first. I don't have a target. I need a target. I need to target something first.
All
I
right,
need
there
a
we go.
target.
Now we're good.
I don't have a target.
I
need
don't have a target.
I need to target something first. I don't have a target. I'm out of range. I need to get closer.
Well,
It's too far away.
it's too far away.
need a target.
It's too far away.
I need to target something first. I don't have a target.
Well, it's just
I'm
not
out
even
of
gonna
range.
have it.
I need to get closer.
I would like to kill this fucking guard.
I need to target something first. I don't have a target.
You never have a target. Man, I am low, aren't I? Well, I'm not too low. I'm about mid. I'll take it. Dude, why isn't this fucking shit working? But yeah, for some reason it's not letting me fucking do anything on this screen. Hmm. Hmm. That's not what I'm looking for. Why isn't this working over here? That's so weird. This monitor just isn't working. I don't know. What the fuck? Well, that's annoying. I may just have to restart the stream. Well, here, let me just try and exit game and then log back in and see if that helps.
You can break it, but it's
Whoa,
hard.
there, that did
It
help.
requires great care. The bigger the system is, the
The harder
more
it is.
care, the harder it is. You have to overcome what's called chaos.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And it requires more and more precision. For 10 particles, you might be able to do it with some effort. For 100 particles, it's really hard. For 1,000 or 1,000,000
Is
particles,
hard.
forget it. But not for any fundamental reason, just because it's technologically too hard
It's just hard.
to
What
make the
fuck?
system go backward.
I'm gonna restart my computer.
So no
Hold on.
time travel for engineering
Dude,
reasons.
it won't even let me stop the stream.
Oh no. What is time travel? Time travel to the future? That's easy.
Yes.
You just close your eyes, go to sleep, and you wake up in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
A good nap gets you there. Yeah.
A good nap gets you there, right?
But